It's about connection with our art, connection with the greater universe, with Mother Nature, and with people.
You're a passionate creative, and so are we. Join me, Brie Stockwell, and my podcast partner, Len Metcalf, as we navigate the ups and downs of living creative lives while teaching you how to do it too. Time to pull back the curtain on our creative affair. I'll start. Hey, everyone, it's Brie. After some technical false starts, we're here. I'm here with Len Metcalf, and today on A Creative Affair, we're going to talk about the book, Big Magic. We have been talking about doing this for I don't know how long, so I'm excited that we're finally doing it. So this is the book. If you don't know this book, it's called Big Magic. It's by Elizabeth Gilbert, who also wrote Eat, Pray, Love, but it has nothing to do with the book Eat, Pray, Love. So this is a really fun book. Len, what did you think about it? Hi, Len.
How are you?
Good.
You're well. We've been talking for a while, folks, and enjoying catching up because it has been a while since we've spoken, and it's been lovely to catch up.
Always.
This book actually references Eat, Pray, Love quite a few times through it, and being a writer, she is incredibly interested in creativity from a writer's perspective, isn't she? It's so much of the story, and I'm going to use the word story very pointedly because this book is full of stories about creativity around particular points, and she always illustrates what she's talking about with a really beautifully written story of explanation, and it's almost a little collection of short stories in some ways that illustrate so many different points about how to be creative.
Well, I think any good educational book has story woven within it, because there is a lot of talk about creativity specifically, but it's the stories that we remember, and it's those that we refer back to when we're trying to remember a point that someone made. Like, did you read the part about the Elk Talk?
Yeah, so that doesn't come back to my head straight away.
She talks about submitting this manuscript called Elk Talk to...
So you even remembered the name of the story.
Right. Well, I saw it in the book when I was just thumbing through, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that story. So she talks about submitting a manuscript, like a short story, to this short story publication. And the editor said, thank you, but no thanks. Like she has a rejection. Elizabeth Gilbert has a rejection letter from Elk Talk. And then when she got what is that called? Not a publicist, an agent. Her literary agent submitted her story again to this same publication. And Elizabeth Gilbert got a letter saying, oh, it's just the perfect story. I just loved it so much. Same editor. And it just felt so familiar, and Elizabeth was like, yeah, because she thought to herself, yeah, because you've read it before. And I'm not going to tell her that. Right. And so sometimes it's just a matter of, I really like that little story because it must be in this part persistence. She breaks up the book into 6 different parts, and one of them is persistence. And I think that's key to being a creative, is just keep on going. How do you keep on going? Because what happens one time doesn't mean anything about your abilities and all of that. I mean, this is the same story, and the editor loved it, but it was just later. Who knows if she had a bad day or, whatever. So I just think you just keep going.
Well, I think also that the gravitas, is that the right word, of the agent saying to her, this is a really good book, I'm representing this person, actually shifted the way that she read it, and maybe the first time she didn't even read it properly. So many agents or so many editors actually employ staff to read their books because the pile of books is so huge. Someone's reading them and they're getting their opinions and they're turning stuff away, like, oh, that person's unknown, I'm not interested in publishing another unknown. But I think this happens in art a lot, and it's something that I've encountered, that uh, when someone with a lot of gravitas actually says, hey, this person is worth listening to and looking at, the attitudes of other people really shift and change.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, we really wouldn't know, unless we talk to that editor,
Of
right?
course we
Like,
don't.
I know, but it's interesting to think of, like, what are all the possibilities? Could she have been tired the first day, Maybe she just, maybe a story about elks. She's like, yeah, it's not really what I'm interested in. But maybe later she was prepped by another story, or, I mean, who knows? I mean, seriously, who knows? And the moral there for me is you don't know. And that's why you just keep submitting and working on stuff and not. I think the point for Elizabeth with this story was, don't take it personally. It's not about you and your art. It could just be someone's bad day. It doesn't mean anything. Just keep going, keep moving forward, just keep doing it. And I just think that's a huge part of a creative life. Like, I'm so glad she added that.
Doing it for the art rather than for the reward of getting it published is a very big part of this, isn't it? It's this keeping going. Like, I started out wanting to be well known and make my name for myself as an artist, and I had all these grand dreams. And in the end, I have to really focus on that the art is important to me, and that that personal relationship has to come to the surface to be the most important one, rather than the external one. So, uh, like, the same story, and I get quite a different, I don't know, moral from the same thing, which is interesting. Happens all the time, doesn't it?
Brie and Len's book club. Well, that's what a book discussion is about. Like, you hear about someone's experience and you each glean different things. And that's why this is so great to share, because if you as the audience, if you've also read it, I bet you may have had similar observations as we have, or maybe something totally different, which is also, I think, which is also really fun. I love what you said, Len, which you talked about making art for us. And in the book, she's like, do not make art support you and pay your bills. Like, that sometimes can really take time to make that happen. And I think so often we think, oh, we're making this art. Of course, we should sell it. We should, make it, we should make it support us. We should make it do all these things. And it really could just be for the love of doing it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Totally.
And truthfully, like, you're not even really making money with your art, right? I mean, you're a photographer or you're an artist, but how often are you, like, selling your actual art?
Is that a question to me? Was that to our
that's
audience
you.
or to me? Oh,
I'm just curious.
How often do I sell print? It's very, very rare. It's incredibly rare. I've got an exhibition hanging at the moment. It's part of a larger exhibition, and nothing's been sold. And I was at the opening and I watched other people's work get sold. And I'm like, oh, isn't mine good enough?
Right.
Or what have I done with the price? Have I priced it too high? And the answer was yes, I priced it high because I love my picture frames and I didn't want the picture frames to be sold. and they weren't cheap frames, and so I put the price up. But yeah, this is an ongoing issue for me personally. Like, I opened my own art gallery and I sold enough art to live off for a period of time, but I did not enjoy it. I did not enjoy making art to sell. And I definitely did not enjoy trying to sell it every day and being in a gallery and doing the art talk and trying to, not that I'm a very pushy salesman, um, it just sold itself in some ways just by being nice, but uh, it was soul destroying. Uh, Wanting to be and thinking that your work is marvelous and it's uh, changing the world and it's unique and beautiful. And once I figured out what started to sell and I started to go and make that, my work became incredibly boring. Like, the soul left it when commerce became involved. The soul left. And see, in this little exhibition, there was a person standing there with a sketchbook drawing my photograph. And they were pointing it out, going, "Oh, look at the shape of the hand and that and the motion there. Isn't that so beautiful?" That was the biggest reward I could have ever had. And it was so special to me, and people coming up to me and saying, "Your work's really beautiful and we really love it," was more important than the actual sales thing. So I've switched this around in my head, and I've stopped worrying about selling, and I've given up on it, I suppose, and have learnt to enjoy it for its own sake and enjoy it because I love it. And I think that's part of what she's saying in her book, isn't it?
Yeah. And there are various ways to like make money from art. I suppose what we do is art. It's a tangent from art, right? Like we do mentoring and coaching and, provide education.
Tours and workshops.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let me clarify from the book. And I wish I had a quote. She says, don't, let me think. What I got out of it was she was like, don't make art pay your bills, but also, I think she's saying don't rely on art to pay your bills. Do something else while you do art. And then when art is ready to pay your bills, lean into it. Like when she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, like she was still working. And it wasn't until afterwards, like she really started to make some money. So I think these things take time. Like if we want to make money with our art, I think it's definitely okay to bring in money a different way while we hone our skills, while we build that up, while we do other things, So, I mean, I have multiple things that I do. So my art does not pay my bills. And I've got multiple things that I do, one of which is not even related to art totally. So I love that because I love that thinking or that advice from her because I really think that it's healthy to take away some of that pressure because we love, we talk about the passion, our passion for creating. And when we have the pressure to create, that I think that can strip away some of the passion as well. And that's not really what I'm interested in having or doing.
It's definitely a certain personality that is required to make a business part of it. And I don't think I have that. And um, enlisting someone else to take over that hasn't ever worked. I've tried that as well. But making a living off a side hustle, I suppose you could call it, has been absolutely amazing. And I never planned to be an art teacher, and it never even crossed my mind. And I know I studied it as a qualification when I was in my 20s, and I went into a school in the practical and actually taught art and went, oh, this sucks. I'm not going to do this. And it wasn't because I didn't enjoy teaching art. It was because I'd hated the whole school system. And it never occurred to me that teaching my love, because I was making money out of teaching, would be a viable alternative. And it's turned out to be the most beautiful and special thing that I could have ever chosen to do. And it turned up on my lap, really, rather than this huge plan. But I look back today and I feel like my whole life was preparing for this, which is really weird. Like I've done all the jigsaw pieces and all the groundwork to be exactly where I am. And I'm sure that's why being successful as an artist didn't work, is because that wasn't really what I should be doing, is that my skills are in teaching and mentoring people. And that's where my magic really lies. And art is just the vehicle for this personal development of believing that you are creative and learning all the skills of creativity and design and the mechanics of it all, how to be an artist. That's where my magic space is supposed to be. Like I really firmly believe that through this process, I discovered who I was in it, and I'm in exactly the spot that I should be.
I love that.
And it shouldn't be selling all your work and living off selling your art, because I'm actually communicating and getting through a whole different thing.
Yeah. And that's not to say that never works. I think it can, I don't want to limit anybody, but it can take time. And so making a space, if you want art to support you, then I just think it takes a little time, and doing it intentionally too, so you don't have that pressure that you like have to sell something or you have to do this and you have to make this, art that looks like this. So, and if you want to do that, you totally can. If that's what lights you up, then totally do that too. Right?
I think want to is a key word there. And I didn't want it enough to make it work, and I didn't stick at it, and I gave up. But I've stuck at something else that I do love. And the point of my story wasn't to say not to pursue it. It was definitely to say, find out what works for you.
Yeah.
And like I found a way to make my art, make meaningful art, and it becomes advertising for me. And people absolutely love it. And it brings people to me to do what I like to do. So I'm in this enviable position where people pay me to take them to beautiful places that I want to go to.
Right.
Like, how magic
It's totally
is that?
magic.
And I get to make art while I'm there, because they want to be a part of that creative process in that same time. So, yeah, it's magic.
Yeah,
isn't it?
totally. I just happened to stare down at the title because you said it's magic, and I'm like, yeah, it's like big magic because that's the name of the book.
Exactly.
And then it says underneath it, the little subtitle says "Creative Living Beyond Fear." And she talks a lot about fear in this book and how, fear and creativity relate to each other, like what their relationship is. And I just think that's so often we do have fear. And I hope, can I read this now? Of course, you're going to say
do.
yes.
Let's share.
I have thought about this. So in the book, she writes a letter to fear. Like when she says, whenever she's starting a new project, or was it one time? Anyway, I think it was one time, and then it seems to me, when you read a book, you kind of have these like wisps of what you remember, it seems to me that whenever she starts a new project, she has this letter that she reads. And I'm going to read it because she posted it on her Facebook. It is very, very public. So you can access this. All right. Here's what she says. Fear. I recognize and respect that you are a part of this family, and so I will never exclude you from our activities. But still, your suggestions will never be followed. You're allowed to have a seat and you're allowed to have a voice, but you are not allowed to have a vote. You're not allowed to touch the road maps. You're not allowed to suggest detours. You're not allowed to fiddle with the temperature. Dude, you're not even allowed to touch the radio. But above all else, my dear old familiar friend, you are absolutely forbidden to drive. And I don't know if that's word for word, but that was up on her Instagram. Somebody wrote it all out with some nice penmanship. But I love knowing that fear is part of the creative process. Like it is going to come along and ride with us. But we can absolutely have control over whether or not we let it drive us and take the wheel and make all the decisions. And like, that's important. I talk to people in my coaching practice about this work and how do we do this on purpose. And this is what she's saying. Of course, fear is going to come. We acknowledge that. You're part of the family. Hey, you're here. Like, I notice you. But also, you're not in charge at all. Like, and in no time will you ever be in charge because I don't allow it. And I love that very clear boundary. I think the trick is in how do we actually do that and put that into practice? Curious what your thoughts are on that, Len, or on any of that.
Well, the first bit that really stands out is the personification of fear. So she turns it into this character and labels it and says, hey, you're this voice or this thing that's a part of me. You're part of my family. Like, I need to have fear. Fear stops us doing stupid things like killing ourselves or hopefully like getting too close to the cliff or driving too fast, all those sort of things, hopefully. So it has a really important part in our life. But by personifying it, she's able then to help put it in a little bit of a box. And in this conversation, she says, she's acknowledging that, hey, you're going to come and be part of this process, but I'm not going to let you take over. And I'm not going to let you steer it or control it. And really, she's starting to identify the emotions or the words or what's happening in her mind as she's working when fear pops itself up, and then she can just go, oh, actually, that emotion or that thought is coming from fear, not from the artwork or for my creative self. So I'm going to put you back in your box and ignore you and get back over here and actually get my head stuck back into the creativity. And I think that's a really interesting tactic, and it's I think it's really beautiful. And I think that how she deals with fear is incredibly beautiful in that way. Talking to it, saying, "Here, no, you're not going to take over and ruin or take away my fearless," which is the other side, isn't it? Which is the side that we want, is being fearless and childlike and experimental, and we want that side to blossom, the creative side.
I actually do this a lot with various emotions. I do this with like self-doubt. Whenever I hear myself going, oh, I don't know if, I'm like, oh, there's self-doubt. I'm like, hey, I see you there. I know sometimes you come along. Like, and it's a way for me personally to acknowledge that there's part of me that is trying to help in some way by feeding me this emotion that initially doesn't seem to be productive. I mean, I know there's always a reason for it, but I literally can just talk to that part of my mind or the self-doubt like it's, like a little, I don't know, not a little sister, but like it's personified in some way. Hey, I see you're there. I see what you're trying to do. I see you're trying to be helpful, but it's actually not. And I've decided not to listen to you. And, so she does that with fear. Like, hey, I see you there. I see you hanging around. Still not going to listen. I'm not going to let you drive this, because the minute fear is so powerful. So the minute we start allowing ourselves to really experience it and feel it and lean into it and get sucked in by it, then it shuts our brains down. And automatically we start to lose creativity and motivation and lots of other things. And so when we can just notice that it's there, and this is a skill that we can learn. When we just can notice that it's there and notice that it's happening and just do our stuff anyway, that's really cool. That's a really cool place to be, because then we're not like afraid that we're going to be afraid or that we're going to experience fear. We can be like, yeah, of course it's there because I'm doing something new. For me, it's like, oh, of course I'm going to have some self-doubt. Of course the I don't know is going to come. I'm doing something new. That's usually when it comes. And if we can just start to notice that more, then we can just keep doing what we want to do no matter what. Like, we have the wheel. We're in the driver's seat, not, this part of this unconscious part of our brain that wants to like save us from whatever success we're trying to achieve. So
It's so often that we, what's the right word? That we deny feelings, don't we? And thoughts and emotion. And to deal with them, acknowledging them, identifying them and accepting them as being there is part of the way of getting around them, or moving through, not getting around them, that's the wrong word, moving through them and dealing with them. So it's almost our steps of grieving and all these other things that we go through. Like, initially, we start becoming fearful of our art, or one part of it. And when we start to notice that, rather than denying that fear is this thing that's growing, or this anxiety, or wherever it is, she labels it as fear. As that's starting to grow, if we can then identify it, sit with it for a little bit. What's going on here? How's that happening? How does this feel? What's happening? And then actually acknowledging it and then turning it away. It's beautiful. It's another lovely metaphor that she brings forward in her book, and her book's written in these beautiful metaphors, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I guess she does it through like stories and stuff. Right. We already said she does it through stories, but and I just think the whole book is so well written. Listen, if you haven't picked up this book, go do it. I got mine on Audible. I have a paper copy. There's so many interesting things to glean. Can I talk about something that I think initially was controversial for me? I was like, I don't think that's the way it works. I just don't. I was like, I don't think I believe her. And in some ways,
is this the bit where she talks about how ideas are in the universe?
Yes. I think we've discussed this before.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's talk about it again. I'd love to hear. You sound like you've shifted.
Well, there's some parts that I agree with. And then there's other parts that I'm like, I just don't know still. So, but I think any good book leaves you with more questions, right? Like, maybe it solves some things for you, but it also leaves, you to like ask yourself things and chew on things and make decisions on your own, Okay, so she has a little section called How Ideas Work, right? And Len, you can help me fill in the gaps here. But she talks about how ideas are always like creative ideas are always flowing around. And she even gives the example of like, sometimes there will be inventions that come out at the same time without those people having talked to each other. it's just like it's ready to come out, and whoever like exists, the idea is ready to be in existence, and whoever can bring it into existence first, not wins, but I think the ideas always want to be created, right? So I don't even know how to explain that. It's very like ethereal and magical. And this is the magic part. This is the magic part of big magic. So that's what I think.
She's talking very much that the idea is external from us, and it lives in the ether, in the universe, and it's trying to find its way out through someone. And the same idea could find its way out through different people and appear in different places at the same time. And there's so many examples, like the invention of photography is like that. Like the problem was how to fix the image. Like we could see the image through camera obscura for many, many years beforehand, but to actually hold the image, and we could actually get it there for a few seconds, but then to keep it for longer. And two people worked it out almost simultaneously. Or evolution. Charles Darwin won. He got his book published and got it out, and there was someone else working on the same theory and had a slightly different theory, which actually turned out to be more accurate than Charles Darwin's one in the long run, and has actually been shown to be more closely aligned with what they think is actually happening today. So while Charles Darwin won that one, the idea was more complex. But it's a really magical idea, and perhaps this is just a metaphor, a story that helps her understand and to deal with the fact that her idea has appeared somewhere else in the world at the same time. Like, does it live in the ether or not? Maybe that doesn't matter. But she uses that, and that beautiful story about how they, these ideas are transferred between people, and the, physical connection has them joined up. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. It's about letting go that ideas aren't the be-all and end-all of absolutely everything in your world, which I think as artists we can get hung up on. Like, oh, that's my idea, that one's stolen from me. Or I didn't get to it first, but I had it. I've definitely suffered from that.
So the little story that Len's talking about is Elizabeth created this storyline. She was going to write this novel, and she did all this research. This idea came to her. She did all this research. She had everything like lined up. She hadn't finished it. She had put it down for various reasons. Like she goes through all the reasons. And, this is more drawn out in the book, obviously. And one day she meets this author that she really loves. Like she looks up to her, and they hug and maybe do a little kiss on the cheek or something. And they end up meeting up, I don't know, maybe a year later or more. And the author says, I'm really excited about this thing I'm working on. And Elizabeth says, would you tell me? And she says, so she tells her the storyline of this book she's writing. And Elizabeth says, that's the exact, almost minus one tiny detail, the exact story that I was writing. It was like a girl goes to Brazil and does these things. And I mean, there's no way you could have crafted it in... How would you ever create that exact story without this theory of ideas being possible, without believing that this theory is possible, that ideas can transfer from person to person, that ideas just exist and fly through the world and want to be brought to life. And because Elizabeth wasn't working on it, she transferred it unknowingly to this other woman. So I love that what you said, Len, was maybe it doesn't matter. And I actually was thinking while you were talking earlier, not that it doesn't matter, but maybe some float around and some come from me. Like maybe that's also the case, because I see some as I've had ideas that I'm like, where did that come from? There's no way I would have thought of that just it just came to me, right? Could we, like, if you're in this creative space or you've, lived long enough, you've had ideas that have come to you that you're like, I don't know where that came from. Where in the world? There's no way I could have thought that up. And then there's other ideas you're like, yeah, that's been brewing inside me for a long time. And all of a sudden it formulates, like it forms into something more concrete. And then boom, there it is. Right. So maybe it's a little bit of both. But this is like the magic she's talking about, is these ideas. And she goes on to talk about, I'm sorry, I'm talking for a long time. She goes on to talk about other people who are like trying to like catch on to ideas and hold them and keep them. Otherwise they'll flow away. And actually that's partly what I disagree with. I don't want people to be afraid of losing ideas. Like if that's going to be a thing for you, you'll know. Otherwise you could let it go. I don't know. I just think it creates unnecessary fear and anxiety around creating, like, oh no, I have to get it done quickly or I'm going to lose it. I don't know. What do you think? Have you felt that before? Or tell me what you think about all this.
Oh, yeah, I have to write them down with fear of losing them. So that's why my notebook is so special to me. And I do worry about that sometimes. And I've definitely had ideas and have forgotten them. And it's usually around things like writing an article, and they're the ones that I don't seem to explore long enough to and repeat them over and over to go into my memory to keep them. I do have a little story to share with you, and around this really lovely topic is that many years ago, this idea came to me somewhere along the line, and it was to photograph and create a photographic deck of the tarot cards, because I'm a tarot card reader and I learnt when I was a kid, and sometimes I spend time with them and other times I don't, and I'm really interested in their meanings and understanding, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in the cards. So, I could make a photographic version. Wouldn't that be so lovely to set up each of the 72 cards? And like, that's obviously a huge project to do. And it sits there and it floats in my head, and I talk to people about it and I shared the idea. And a dear friend who's a photographer and a model actually comes to me and says, I'm doing a photographic deck of the tarot cards. Will you be in the first card? Like that I'm going to do. And she got me dressed up and we did the magician, and I was the magician, and I had to personally deal with this idea that, she's stolen my idea. And that was my first reaction, is like, I must have had this as a conversation with you and told you.
Maybe you kissed her.
And therefore, maybe I kissed her. Well, probably.
I'm sorry. Okay, go on.
And she denies that we ever had that conversation, and I can't remember. And this is so many years ago. And over the process, that first card wasn't a success because it was only an idea at that point. And as she got further and further, she ended up with different people for being different cards, and I became another whole set of cards. Like I'm in 5 of the cards, I think, acting out, and I'm the King of Pentacles, I think, in which is the card I choose for myself too. Anyway, I eventually realized that it doesn't matter if I'd told her or not, and that was just me hanging on to my own self-importance and my own set of beliefs. And when I actually look around the world, it's not a unique idea. There's hundreds of them. Like, it's not the first time it's ever been done.
And it's not the last.
I thought it had been. And it's not the last. And then she came to me and said, someone else is copying my idea. And I'm like, well, are they actually copying your photos? Or are they just playing with this idea? And then, like, there's a deck already over here happening, and, Salvador Dali painted one, and, like, it has a long tradition with artists playing with these things. And like we could take Big Magic's idea is that the idea is floating in the ether and it's just waiting for someone to pick it up, or perhaps it's not such a unique idea either, and lots of people end up thinking about, oh, this is going to be a good thing. Let's go and do it and see what happens. And perhaps it's a wider world. And I'm not going to lecture people on what you should think and believe. And I think there's room for both. And that's the beauty in her book, is all of these gorgeous stories about creativity have, answers that help her and others, the people that read it, actually deal with these phenomenons that we really don't understand, and perhaps we don't need to understand.
I don't think we do. I think some things are just a little unexplainable. And I think that's partly what makes it fun, and exciting. Speaking of exciting, did you know, I'm showing Len right now, there is this little subheading and it's called Have an Affair. I think we're on the right track here, Len.
Well, it's interesting that she talks about love and affair, very much a part of it. And it's something that we spend a lot of time talking about, is this conversation and this love affair with the art, but also with other creatives, because that becomes an inspiration for us to work. And so much of this is about relationships. And I think that's a big thing in her stories too, is that, this connection with this other artist about the story. She talks about it's the moment that it kissed, that the idea went from one person to the other person. I think that's absolutely beautiful and romantic and gorgeous and very, very cute. But the bigger part of that story is that it deepened their friendship.
Right.
And that it made it stronger and more important and special, rather than jealousy rising up, or fear or anger at ourselves for letting that particular idea slip through our fingers. It's about connection with our art, connection with the greater universe, with Mother Nature, and with people. It's beautiful. It's very, very beautiful.
I want to read this part.
Please do.
She says, when people are having an affair, they don't mind losing sleep or missing meals. They will make whatever sacrifices they have to make, and they will blast through any obstacles in order to be alone with the object of their devotion and obsession. And then in italics, she writes, because it matters to them. And then her next sentence, this is my favorite: let yourself fall in love with your creativity like that and see what happens. And then there's more. That's on page 160 and 161. So go get you the book and read that little section. If you have fallen out of love, if you are in what she calls, she says, stop treating your I know. She says, stop treating your creativity like a tired, old, unhappy marriage. And start regarding it with the fresh eyes of a passionate lover. Yeah, amen. And then there's more if you want more, like, innuendos and creativity combined. Yeah, but I think that's such a great point. Like, whatever it is that we're doing, are we tired? Is it gotten old? Has it gotten stale? How can you infuse some magic and passion into more often into what you're doing? And so, I said the magic comes from this, like the ideas, but really the magic is all about the magic of creativity. This is why we say magic so often, right? Is there's a magic in creativity that's sometimes unexplainable. And how can you grab that back? How can you refresh that? How can you find something new to hold on to, and, maybe you need to switch up what you do. I don't really know what it is for you. But I just love that thought to let myself fall in love with my creativity like it's my affair.
I love that. I'm having an affair with drawing at the moment.
Yes, you are.
And it's really interesting because the more I dive into it again, and this is a return because drawing was a very, very big part of my life when I was a teenager. It was more important than photography and more important than painting. Drawing was the key that held me together, and I eventually stopped. And I've stopped for 30 years, not just stopped for a little bit. And we just had Creative February, and I got all my students into Creative February and had this incredibly beautiful hive of activity. And I decided that it was time to return to drawing, and I videoed my drawing every day for the month and created a course in mark making. And today I'm so excited to buy a fountain pen, waiting for it to come in the post, and actually another new sketchbook, as if I haven't got enough sketchbooks here already, but a new sketchbook to start and to race out and start drawing. And I'm having an affair with drawing again. And
Wait, y'all, before we got on this podcast to record, he was like telling me about all his inks, the inks that he was going to buy and how like all the like the colors that he wants. And he said, I fell in love with this brown one. I mean, the way that you were talking about it, Len, I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely having an affair with this right now. Oh, I said it's sepia. So if you look at most of Len's photography, it's all sepia toned. And I'm like, of course it's sepia. It's so very Len, Len of you.
Yes. And I've never drawn in brown ink before, but I've painted in brown. I've got sepia paintings I painted when I was a young person. But that's about the love, isn't it? And that gives me space for my photography. And I don't have to keep pushing it along. I'm allowed to wander off and have an affair with drawing and getting this huge, beautiful creative burst and learning and creating, how to draw courses and all that sort of stuff and immersing myself in another part of it. And the benefit is that my photography gets dragged along with this as well. Like every exercise I do in how to learn to see will improve my photography. So, this whole having an affair that Liz talks about in this book, I think that's magic too. And of course, our title of our podcast very much plays to that whole point all along. So
That's
yes, we agree with you.
Hey, we created the title before either of us even read this book. So just wanted you guys to know that we had the idea first. No, just kidding.
Yes, see, that came out of the ether yet again.
And I think lots of people think this way too. So this isn't new. These aren't new ideas. They cycle around, So yeah. This book is really good. I find it's fun. She makes a lot of interesting points. And a lot of it is just about how to actually keep creating. Like, how can you just get doing the work and going and not getting stuck in like a fear spiral or some lack of inspiration or whatever it is, like how can you just keep going and keep creating? It's like a whole, however many, 272 pages of please keep creating. This is why, this is how,
So you've got a very, very positive outlook there on this book. And I want to fit it into the broader categories of creativity books. It's very colloquial, So it's very story-based. It is very much a self-help book for creatives to keep going, to address, these fears that come up and how do we keep going. It doesn't get down to the brass tacks of being creative. So if you're a very highly technical person, you might not sit. This book might not sit with when you're trying to go, well, how do I be creative? Because that doesn't actually answer
Right.
that question. This actually gives you these really beautiful stories to encourage you to have a better relationship with yourself and your art. And I think it's a very valuable book, and it's a really entertaining one. And I listened to it on Audible as well. And I was on the train to Adelaide, and I just shut my eyes and was whisked away into her world. And it, I read the whole book or listened to it in one sitting, basically. And I really enjoyed that process, and it was very, very easy to listen to.
Agreed.
And I think it would suit the arty-farty creative ones in the art world. But if you're a technical photographer, you might not get the same sort of thing out of it that us arty ones do.
I don't know. I feel like if you're a technical photographer, then you might be inspired to feel more creative about your work. I don't know. Maybe.
I'd hope so.
Right. Yes, we hope so. I also, that's a really good description of this book. And it's a lot of it is a lot of feeling and listening to her stories. And it's, there's no exercises in here. I just read, The Creative Habit. That one has all kinds of exercises in it. Tons. So this book isn't like that. She's not going to tell you to go out and do specific things, right? But from some of her stories and from some of her examples, you could infer and pick up some of your own, So overall, I thought it was a good read. I too listened, which is why I don't have very many things marked up in my book. And that's okay, because I don't know that I have to have that. So could I read the in conclusion? It's just one little page.
Yeah, please
Elizabeth,
do.
I hope you don't mind. We've encouraged people to read the book, so go buy it. She says in conclusion, creativity is sacred and it is not sacred. What we make matters enormously, and it doesn't matter at all. We toil alone and we are accompanied by spirits. We are terrified and we are brave. Art is a crushing chore and a wonderful privilege. Only when we are at our most playful can divinity finally get serious with us. Make space for all these paradoxes to be equally true inside your soul, and I promise you can make anything. So please calm down now and get back to work, okay? The treasures that are hidden inside you are hoping you will say yes. Isn't that a great ending? I love it. Just get back to
It is
work.
a great ending.
And say yes. You can go back and listen to our podcast about saying yes, because that's a good one.
It definitely is. Well, I think that's a good place to end up, don't you?
Yeah. In conclusion, for sure.
In conclusion.
All right. This concludes the end of Brie and Len's book club.
Well, hopefully people enjoy that. We could do a few more. I have some others that I particularly loved reading that are worth. I'm sure you do too. And wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, we've done Steal Like an Artist, so I'm sure we'll do other ones. Be fun.
Well, everybody, let's say goodbye. So it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me. Bye, y'all. Well, wasn't that fun? As we close another episode of A Creative Affair, would you click on your podcast player and leave us a 5-star review and share with another passionate creative like yourself? Thanks. To find out more about our creative work and mentoring, visit Len at lenschool.com or me, Brie, at creativemindscoach.com.